right, everyone, welcome back. Let's take a look at the next few tasks that we're going to take on. We're going to put these columns in place. We're going to put a beam across resting on top of these columns. And then from there, we're going to need to start to cut away 1, 2, 3 pieces from this rafter and cut away 2 pieces from this rafter over here. So let's get to work. So I'm going to navigate to my site plan. And the reason I do that here, again, is I can see a concrete floor. I can see the rafter that's up above my wall. So I get a chance to see everything. All right, so columns. So I could use this column command, load family, but I don't want to do that. And there's a workflow that I always use, and that's to always use insert load family. The reason I use this is that if I'm in a command, for instance, structural column, and load family, I can navigate to, let's say, English Imperial, and how about, let's see, how do I get there? Well, let's just go let's go to structural framing. And hey, there's wood. It looks like I want wood. What we're going to do is 6 by 6. So let's say I want timber. Here's my, I don't see a 6 by 6, but let's just say, oh, there it is, 6 by 6. I could say okay, and I get this really annoying error message. And this error message is saying, well, you can't have this family. So what I've done by error here is I've told Revit that I want to put a column in place, and I accidentally went to the framing section of families instead of the column section. So to avoid all that, I always just go insert load family. And if I accidentally navigate to the wrong folder, well, then fine, I do. But I at least get loaded what I thought I wanted to load. So English Imperial, here I want to go to structural columns. I'm going to use wood, and I do want timber, and a 6 by 6 is just fine. Notice the dimensions, of course, are actually 5.5 inches. So back to now structure, column, and here's my 6 by 6. I want my column to be a height. Make sure that you have your height checked and not depth. If you're placing a column or structural column, the first default is by depth. So make sure you do height. You want it to go unconnected, and 9 feet is fine. We'll try that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place this column right here at the corner of grid 1 and the back of my, maybe I'm not. I thought I was going to get a nice intersection snap, and I'm not getting that. So in that particular case, then I'm just going to kind of click it so that I'm 1 foot. I'm just going to click it into a random spot. So I'm going to find my temporary dimensions and change it to the grid, and change this one to the upper edge of the concrete. And I want each of those temporary dimensions to be 1 foot. Okay, so I mirror this real quick, find my midpoint snap, and I know my other column is in the correct placement. I'm going to select each column, and over here on the left, I'm going to ask my base to go 2 feet into the ground. So minus 2 feet. And I do that because, well, they're columns, they're going to need to either head down into the ground with some additional foundation down here, or potentially have some steel connector and be bolted into that steel connector. Okay, so back to site, and I'm now going to use a beam, and I don't have the beam that I'm looking for because I want a 6x6 beam to go across there. So insert load family. Here I want to make sure that I go from English to structural framing. So structural framing is beams. Columns are completely different items in Revit. So structural framing, wood, timber, 6x6, okay. And it doesn't have a placement plane associated with it. I'm going to see if I just leave that alone and snap to the midpoints of my columns. Let's see what I get. Okay, so here it is. Let's see where it's at. Could be on the ground. And it's way up here, which is fine. I don't really care. So it's on first floor finish, and it's 11 and 7.5 feet up above where the first floor finish is. Okay, so now I need to get these items in the correct elevation. So I'm going to navigate to my west elevation. I can clearly see these items, and here I have something that's pretty easy to deal with. I want the upper corner of this beam to be at this location right here. So I'm going to create a detail line that gives me some good snaps to go to. And let's see if I can use move on this thing. Yep, didn't think so. I'm only going to be able to go left and right. So I need to understand, I'll draw one more line. I need to understand where this line is in elevation. So my beam here is on the first floor. So I want to find how high this line is from my first floor. 7 and 8 and 7/8. So now if I select this thing, I want its top and bottom to be at 7 and 8 and 7/8. And I got a result. It's pretty hard to see anything, but if I do a window selection, you can see that's exactly what I got. So I'm pretty happy with that. Although now these beams here are too tall. So they're first floor finish, and they go to first floor finish. That's pretty interesting. Well, and my upper offset wants to be that exact same thing. No, I'm going to draw another detail line. Here is the bottom of the beam, and so I want my columns to go up exactly that high. So if I enter my column, I'm going to put my top at the column to be this 7, 3 and 3/8. And things start to look a little more clear. So there's the near column, there's the beam, and of course here's the rear column which also needs to be adjusted to 7 and 3 3/8. Okay, so now if I look at this in the 3D view, things are starting to make sense a little bit. This beam could rest on top of those columns, and looking at the west elevation, I could see that this rafter can sit on top of this beam. So of course the beam needs to get a little bit longer. So currently it goes from inside of column to inside of column. So I'm going to head to my site plan. And I'm just kind of looking at this thinking, why don't I just use some more construction geometry? I draw an annotation line, here's my beam, and drag the end of that beam out over. Look back at it in 3D, and well, I guess that's the answer of why I don't do that. As I went to the site plan, I drew a line on the floor. I drag and snap, and then of course the beam ends up headed down to the floor. So that's not probably a good option. So now I'm going to know that if I'm going to do a little bit of math off screen here. What I'm going to do is find out how far I want to extend this beam so that it goes 11 inches past my grid. Okay, so I'm going to press pause and I'll be back in a second. All right, let's finish this up. So instead of doing a lot of math, because I did some and then I didn't lost my confidence. So I'm going to force the computer to do the math. I'm going to take this beam and I'm just going to drag it shorter. And when I drag my beam, notice my beam really likes to adjust by whole inch lengths. So click, click, 2 inches 4, 2 inches 2, 2 inches. I'm sorry, 2 feet, excuse me. So now my beam is exactly 2 feet short of this grid. Okay, so over here I have this end extension, and I'm going to click on this end extension, and I'm going to say I want my extension to be 2 feet 11 inches. So in other words, I'm going to go the 2 feet over to the grid plus another 11 inches. Notice it came right to that line. I guess I didn't delete that line. So if I navigate to 3D, but by using numbers, then you can see that I did not drag that end of that beam down to the ground. So let's go back to the site plan and do the same thing over here. I'll zoom in and I'll drag this back somewhere. So I'm at 2 feet 2.5, 2 feet 3/4 inches, and exactly 2 feet. And now I can enter an offset for the start extension. Exact same number, and it extends out. Okay, so I've got that taken care of. Navigate back to 3D, and we can see that we've got support for these rafters that are going to come down this end of the shed. Okay, so we've done a bunch of modeling work. In the next video, we're going to come in and we're going to do some cut work. And once we're all done with that, then we're going to finish this roof off with just kind of one array command. Hope this is helpful, and we'll see you in the next session.